I was messing with my best friend's ex when a SWAT team suddenly raided my house. The battering ram hit my bedroom door so hard that my monitor rattled. My hands shot up instinctively, mouse clattering to the floor. They yanked me from my chair, slamming me face first into my desk while someone zip-tied my wrist behind my back. My mom's screams from downstairs cut through everything. Dad's deeper voice was demanding answers. The lead detective looked at my parents as two officers escorted them in, both pale and shaking, then turned to me. "Bastian Ding has been missing for 48 hours, she said flatly. "You're our prime suspect." My stomach dropped through the floor. I didn't even know my bestie's ex was missing. The detective pulled out her phone and swiped to something that made my mom gasp. "We have your text messages," she said, turning the screen toward my parents. "Your daughter has been planning this." I tried to speak, but my throat felt scraped raw. She started reading my texts aloud, each word like a knife in the air. "Just trapped him in a room with no doors," she read, voice like ice. "Watching him pee himself and cry, laughing my butt off." Mom covered her mouth. "Dad went white, that's from The Sims," I choked out, but she kept reading. "Setting the kitchen on fire next, deleted all the smoke alarms so he can't escape." She looked up. "Sent 2 days before Bastian disappeared. She's never hurt anyone," Dad said, voice trembling. "There has to be some mistake." "That's what all the parents say," the detective replied coldly. She scrolled further. "Here brought him to an isolated location and made him wet himself over and over. Won't let him use the bathroom. Time-stamped yesterday afternoon. Sims has bladder mechanics." I screamed, but no one was listening. Daisy, my best friend, had been crushed when Bastian cheated on her. Making a sim version of him and torturing it was just a stupid way to make her laugh. Out of context, though, those messages sounded like real crimes. "My friend loves watching him suffer," the detective read slowly. "Sent right before this one. Already removed all the ladders from the pool. No way out this time." Officers were bagging my phone, my computer, everything. Another was photographing my desk, where I doodled Bastian dies scenarios with little hearts, because Daisy thought it was funny Mom was crying now, soft and broken. Dad kept staring at me like I was a stranger. "What's The Sims?" Mom asked through tears. "Is it some kind of dark web thing?" "It's a life simulation game," I sobbed. "Millions of people play it." The detective ignored me, scrolling again. "Your friend even asked you to stop." "Okay, this is getting creepy, maybe we should stop." And you replied, "No way, I'm just getting started, he deserves worse." She looked up. "She begged you to let it go. You said, 'Not until I've tried every single death.' Stop being weak. You were obsessed." "It's a game," I shouted. "Check my computer." "We're aware how perpetrators sometimes rehearse crimes through gaming," she said coolly. "Virtual practice before the real thing." My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. They thought I'd actually done it, kidnapped Bastian after practicing his murder in The Sims. Then her phone buzzed. She answered, listening closely. Her face shifted. She walked to my computer, still running The Sims, its cheerful music playing. On the screen, Bastian's sim floating dead in the pool. Save files titled "Bastian burns," "Bastian starves," "Bastian gets eaten by Cowplant." She clicked through my chat with Daisy, full context this time. Daisy egging me on, laughing, calling it therapy. The detective straightened, gave a short nod. The officer behind me cut my zip ties. They left without a word. Mom hugged me so tightly I couldn't breathe. Then Dad spoke, his voice cracking. "Bastian's not missing," he said. "He's been staying at the men's shelter on 5th Street for the past 2 weeks. I just stared at him. Dad explained that he volunteers there every weekend, helping with breakfast and intake paperwork. He'd seen Bastian 3 days ago, same hoodie, looking rough but alive. He didn't mention it because he had no idea about any missing person report." Mom's sobs got louder. Then she turned on Dad, furious. "You saw Daisy's ex at a homeless shelter and didn't think to say anything," she cried. "Not even over dinner." Dad's face went red. He stammered that he thought Bastian was just volunteering too, or maybe visiting someone, that it felt wrong to gossip about some kid's personal business. Mom shouted that our daughter had just been raided by SWAT because of information he sat on, that this entire nightmare could have been prevented if he'd said one sentence. The tension in the house shifted so fast it gave me whiplash. From terror about my arrest, to confusion about the timing, to anger at Dad for not connecting the dots sooner. I grabbed my phone off the coffee table where the officers had left it after checking it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the screen. I opened Daisy's contact and hit call. pressing the phone to my ear while Mom and Dad argued in the background. Daisy answered on the second ring, asking if I was okay, if the police thing was real because someone's cousin had posted about SWAT trucks on our street. I cut her off and told her Bastian wasn't missing, that he was at a shelter downtown and my dad had seen him there. There was silence on the other end for about 10 seconds. Then Daisy said that was impossible, that Bastian's parents would never kick him out. They worshipped their golden boy. They thought he was perfect. But I could hear it, the small tremor in her voice that meant she was starting to doubt. She asked why he'd be at a shelter, and I said I didn't know yet, just that Dad saw him there 3 days ago, and he'd apparently been there at least 2 weeks. Daisy went quiet again, then whispered that Bastian's mom had posted on Facebook about praying for their lost son, acting like he'd been taken from them. I spotted the detective's card on the coffee table, bent and smudged from where someone had set it down. I knew I needed to call her back to tell her what we'd found out. I tried to pick it up, but my hands were shaking so hard it slipped through my fingers twice. Mom saw me struggling, took the phone from Daisy, told her we'd call back, then helped me hold the detective's card steady as she dialed the number for me. The detective answered with her last name, brisk and professional, like she was expecting another routine call. Dad took the phone and explained who he was, that he volunteered at the 5th Street shelter and had seen the missing person there multiple times over the last 2 weeks. Even through the speaker, I could hear the change in her voice. It sharpened instantly. She started asking Dad specific questions, when exactly he'd seen Bastian, what condition he was in, whether he'd spoken to him. Dad answered carefully while Mom and I sat frozen on the couch. Finally, the detective said she'd be there within the hour and hung up. We waited in awful silence. Dad looking guilty, Mom furious, and me just trying to stop shaking. 53 minutes later, headlights swept across our living room window. The detective's sedan pulled into the driveway. Just her this time, no SWAT team, no other officers. She looked exhausted, like the case had just gotten far more complicated than she'd wanted. She sat at our kitchen table with Dad, taking his statement, writing everything down in a small notebook. She asked him to describe Bastian's appearance and behavior at the shelter. Dad said Bastian seemed quiet, withdrawn, always sitting in the back corner of the common room. The detective asked if he'd spoken to him. Dad said no. He hadn't wanted to intrude, just recognized him and figured Bastian had his reasons for being there. The detective closed her notebook and looked at all of us. Then she said we were going with her to the shelter to locate Bastian and confirm his identity. We piled into her car, Mom in the front, Dad and me in the back, and she drove us through town toward 5th Street. The whole ride felt surreal after the chaos of the morning, like we'd slipped into some alternate version of reality where I was helping find someone instead of being accused of hurting them. Her radio crackled occasionally, but she ignored it, eyes fixed on the road. The shelter was a brick building that used to be a church, its tall windows still framed by a faint cross above the door. We parked in the small lot. The detective told us to wait in the lobby while she checked if Bastian was there, but Dad said he could show her where the common room was. She agreed. We followed him through the double doors. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and coffee. Dad led us down a hallway to a large room with folding tables and mismatched chairs. Bastian was there, sitting in the corner playing cards with 2 older men who looked like they'd been staying there for a while. He was thinner than in Daisy's photos, cheekbones sharp, eyes hollow with dark circles. He wore a faded gray hoodie and jeans that hung loose on his frame when he looked up and saw us, and the detective's badge clipped to her belt. His face went completely white. The cards fell from his hands, scattering across the table. The detective walked over and asked, "Are you Bastian Ding?" He nodded, not meeting anyone's eyes. She asked him to come with her to a private room. He stood up slowly, like his legs might give out, and followed her into a small office off the common room. The door closed behind them. We stood in the hallway outside the small office, silent. Through the door, Bastian's voice cracked as he cried, saying he never meant for any of this to happen, that he just needed to disappear for a while. The detective's voice was lower, calm but firm, asking questions I couldn't make out. Then Bastian said his parents had found out he was gay 2 weeks ago. They'd gone through his phone, found messages with a guy from his English class, and screamed at him for hours, calling him disgusting, saying he was going to hell. His dad gave him 30 minutes to pack, drove him to this shelter, and left him there. He said he'd been too ashamed to tell anyone, ignored all calls and messages, and let his phone die so he wouldn't have to see their hate or lie to his friends. After a long while, the door opened. The detective stepped out unreadable and asked Bastian if he knew me. He shook his head. She showed him my texts, the ones about trapping and torturing him. His brow furrowed in confusion. He asked why someone would write that. When she explained it was about the Sims, his expression turned to disbelief. He said he'd never even played the game. The detective thanked him and told him he wasn't in trouble. We left the shelter in silence. Outside, the sunlight felt harsh. She apologized for the distress and said they'd had to act based on the evidence they had. Dad asked if we were free to go. She nodded, handed him her card, and left. The car ride home was wordless, no radio, just the hum of tires. The front door hung open from the raid. Inside looked like a storm hit, drawers emptied, furniture overturned, photos on the floor. My bedroom door was split, my bed torn apart, my computer gone. I sank onto the floor, numb, staring at the empty space where my monitor used to be. Mom told me to leave it for tomorrow, but I couldn't stop picking things up. I needed to fix something. Then there was knocking downstairs. Moments later, Daisy burst into my room, mascara streaked, shaking. She hugged me hard, crying that she was sorry. She'd seen the SWAT team and had been panicking all day. When I told her they thought I'd kidnapped Bastian because of our Sims messages, she went pale. "This is my fault," she whispered, sitting down hard on my ruined bed. "I was the one who wanted revenge. I'm the one who told you to make him suffer." I told Daisy that Bastian was safe, that he'd been at a homeless shelter. And why? His parents had kicked him out for being gay. She went silent, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find words. Then she admitted she'd always wondered about him, that she'd seen signs but ignored them. He'd overcompensated, acting overly straight, making comments about girls, clinging to her in public. Until she convinced herself she was wrong. She started crying again, harder this time, shaking as she said how awful she felt about the Sims' revenge, knowing now what he'd been going through while we were joking about killing his digital version. The cheating that had seemed so huge 2 weeks ago suddenly felt meaningless next to him being abandoned by his parents. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat beside her while she cried. Mom came upstairs with tea and sat with us, asking us to explain the Sims. We tried to describe it. A life simulation game millions of people play, sometimes using dark humor as a coping thing. But saying it out loud made it sound childish and cruel. Mom wasn't angry, just confused, which somehow felt worse. We sat there until sunset. Daisy left around 8. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes I saw the SWAT raid, the door bursting open, the zip ties cutting into my wrists. Around midnight I gave up and sat in my closet with the light on, knees pulled to my chest, waiting for morning. When I finally went to campus, people stared. Conversations stopped as I passed. Someone filmed me in the student center, and when I checked social media I saw why, a video of the raid recorded from across the street. The battering ram, me dragged out in zip ties, my mom screaming. Thousands of views, comments calling me a psycho, reposts with my face and name. And email from my advisor, Maya, told me to come to her office. When I got there, she already had the video pulled up. She asked if I was okay and if I needed time off. I said no, I couldn't fall behind. I explained everything too fast. The game, Daisy's breakup, the stupid revenge idea. I even showed her screenshots of the Sims to prove how fake it all looked. Maya said she believed me, but her face stayed serious. She warned that once people think someone's guilty, the truth doesn't matter. That I should be ready for more fallout. By the time I went to my psychology class, I almost turned around and left. But I forced myself to sit in the back. 2 girls in front of me were whispering. I heard my name. "She's totally psycho," one said. "Got away with something." The other girl whispered that the police wouldn't have raided someone's house for no reason. I stared at my blank notebook, pretending not to hear. The professor started talking about cognitive dissonance, but I couldn't focus. The girls kept glancing back until the professor stopped mid-sentence and asked if everything was okay. The whole class turned toward us. One of the girls went red, and he told everyone to focus and respect each other, which only made things worse. Now everyone knew something was up with me. My phone buzzed nonstop. Daisy was texting in all caps. Bastian's parents were claiming they never kicked him out. They said he was unstable and had run away, posting on Facebook about their poor troubled son. Daisy was furious, saying they were lying to save face. I texted back that parents like that always rewrite history after class. Gray from campus security stopped me. He said he'd heard about the raid and wanted to make sure I felt safe. I told him about the whispers and the video, but said no one had threatened me. He gave me his card and told me to call if I needed help. He meant well, but talking to security in the hallway just made me feel more exposed. My phone kept buzzing, messages from classmates and strangers. Some said they believed me, others asked invasive questions. What it felt like to be zip-tied, if I'd really made the sim of Bastion, if I'd ever hurt anyone for real. It was too much. I turned my phone off and shoved it in my bag. The silence felt like the first breath I'd taken all day. That evening, Dad drove me to the police station to get my phone and computer back. He didn't say much. The detective processing the return was young and looked disgusted. She made snide comments about how lucky I was and shoved my stuff across the counter. Dad thanked her. She ignored him at home. I set up my computer. When it turned on, the sims loaded automatically. Bastion's sim was still floating face down in the pool. The cheerful background music made my stomach twist. I stared for a long time, then deleted the entire save file. The game asked if I was sure. I clicked yes and watched it vanish in seconds. Every death, every screenshot, gone. Then Daisy called. She said Bastion had reached out, wanting to apologize for cheating and explain everything. She didn't know whether to talk to him. Part of her wanted closure, part of her was still angry. I told her maybe she should hear him out. He was clearly going through more than any of us knew. Getting kicked out for being gay was huge and traumatic. But I told Daisy I understood why she was still hurt. The cheating had still been real. She said she felt manipulated, that their whole relationship now felt fake, like she'd just been a prop in his attempt to look straight. I didn't know how to argue with that because she wasn't wrong. Bastion had used her, even if he hadn't meant to. We stayed on the phone talking about how messy everything felt. Nothing seemed simple anymore. 2 days later, Mom knocked on my door at breakfast. She sat on my bed and asked if I'd thought about talking to someone. I told her I didn't need therapy, but she reminded me I'd been waking up screaming all week. Finally, I agreed just to calm her down. She made an appointment with a trauma specialist named Dr. Lockatch for Thursday. At the clinic, I filled out forms in the waiting room. When Dr. Locke called me in, she asked what brought me there. I started explaining the Sims' misunderstanding and suddenly broke down crying. Everything poured out. The raid, the zip ties, my mom screaming. Dr. Locke let me cry and said I was showing signs of acute stress disorder. My brain was trying to process something senseless, and the nightmares were part of that. After the session, I checked my phone. Bastion's roommate, Colt, had posted a long statement online saying Bastion's parents kicked him out after finding gay dating apps. The post was going viral. Some people were supportive, others judgmental, arguing about blame. The next morning, I got called to the dean's office. He said several students had filed complaints saying they felt unsafe around me. He showed me the police report clearing me, but said that on campus, perception mattered as much as facts. He asked me to keep a low profile. That was impossible. People recognized me from the video. After class, I found my car covered in red spray paint. The word psycho scrawled across the door. Security took photos and filed a report, but said the cameras had blind spots. I sat there staring at the paint, trying not to cry. Then Daisy texted. She'd met Bastion for coffee. He apologized and explained he'd dated her to prove he was straight, thinking it might make his parents accept him. Instead, it made him hate himself more. He'd cried the whole time. Daisy said she felt torn, angry, hurt, but also sorry for him. She said understanding his pain didn't erase her own. I told her she didn't need to forgive him right away, that it was okay to take time. That evening, I heard my parents arguing in the kitchen. I stood at the top of the stairs, listening to my parents argue. Dad kept saying he felt awful for not mentioning he'd seen Bastion at the shelter sooner. Mom said it wasn't his fault, though her voice was tight with anger. When their voices got louder, I went back to my room and shut the door. The next week, my parents met with a lawyer about suing the police. They came home looking defeated. The lawyer said the raid had followed procedure. The texts gave them probable cause. We could sue, but it would be expensive and we'd likely lose. Emotional damage and a broken door weren't enough for a case. Mom cried quietly while Dad held her hand. 3 weeks after the raid, someone slammed a door in my dorm and I completely froze. My chest locked up, vision went dark, and I slid down the wall shaking. It took over an hour for my body to calm down.